and we have to fight for our rights. You're going to have to fight for that.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 best history documentaries.
500,000 young people can get together and have 3 days of fun and music, and have nothing but fun and music, and I God bless you for it.
For this list, we'll be looking at non-fiction feature films that most powerfully express or preserve an important event in history. We're excluding docu-series like the Civil War and the World at War. Which documentaries do you find most effective in bringing history to life? Give us your account in the comments. Number 10, They Shall Not Grow Old. Peter Jackson has made some of the most epic movies of all time. His feature documentary debut might have been a similarly lavish account of World War I. Instead, the BAFTA-nominated They Shall Not Grow Old paints a more intimate and immersive portrait of life in the trenches.
Well, we were always told that you never heard the shell that hit you, because most of them traveled faster than sound.
You could literally feel your heart pounding against the ground.
The project was still daunting, remastering 100-year-old footage in color and narrating with archived interviews of more than 100 British military veterans.
I mean, you took part in everything because you had to fill your time in, you know. Otherwise, all you did was sit about and smoke.
Only a technical wizard like Jackson could revive this content so vividly. It's not about gimmick, but about fully conveying these men's camaraderie, adventure, and trauma. They Shall Not Grow Old epitomizes the value of modern remastering technology by epitomizing the experience of the Great War. Number 9, Waltz with Bashir. Israeli filmmaker Ari Folman could not simply explain his experiences serving in the 1982 Lebanon War. With Waltz with Bashir, he shows them with expressive rotoscope animation. Folman's interviews with contemporaries and a psychiatrist bring perspective to his repressed memories of combat, including the Sabra and Shatila massacre. This highly experimental documentary is as cathartic as it is beautiful. The mix of candid conversation and high-tech artistry resonates the brutality of the war and the human wages of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This made the movie a dark horse at many international awards in many different categories. Waltz with Bashir is itself hard to explain, except as one of the most poignant and personal anti-war works in Israeli cinema. Number 8, Woodstock.
You know, this is the most outrageous spectacle I've ever witnessed, ever.
Michael Wadley didn't know what he was in for when he documented the Woodstock Music and Art Fair in 1969. 120 hours of spectacular music, political dialogues, and unpredictable exploits were stylishly compiled by several editors.
What does it cost to put one of these things together?
Fortune.
A fortune.
Right.
Among them was little-known filmmaker Martin Scorsese. Wadley's Woodstock was released less than a year after the festival to massive box office and critical success, cementing a chaotic counterculture phenomenon as one of the defining cultural events of the 1960s. The epic documentary was later admitted into the United States National Film Registry for its historical preservation. Just as Woodstock has become recognized as one of the greatest concerts ever seen, Wadley's history-making account is one of the most popular American documentaries ever produced.
We have had no idea that there would be this size group. And because of that, you've had quite a few inconveniences as far as water and food and so forth.
Number 7, I Am Not Your Negro. Celebrated intellectual James Baldwin never completed his memoir, Remember This House. The manuscript was used as the foundation for Raoul Peck's I Am Not Your Negro, an account of Baldwin's life and uncompromising views on race relations.
It's not a racial problem. It's a problem whether or not you're willing to look at your life and be responsible for it and then begin to change it.
Samuel L. Jackson's surprisingly hushed narration and archived recordings of Baldwin lead this evocatively stylized examination of the Black experience in American history. The essay captivated audiences as a uniquely vivid expression of this evergreen yet underappreciated subject.
The world is not white. It never was white. cannot be white. White is a metaphor for power.
It became an unlikely cultural phenomenon for its accolades and word of mouth during a new period of racial enlightenment in the United States. More than a complete portrait of an important man, I Am Not Your Negro is an especially important history lesson of timeless relevance.
What I am trying to say to this country, to us, is that we must know this. We must realize this. That no other country in the world have been so fat and so sleek and so safe and so happy and so irresponsible and so dead.
Number 6, How to Survive a Plague. Most Americans didn't realize the horror of a public health catastrophe before 2020. But How to Survive a Plague gives viewers an understanding of a crisis that ravaged a community throughout the 1980s and 90s. Renowned investigative journalist David France delivers a dense report on the scope, political complacency, and activism surrounding the AIDS epidemic. At the center are the democratic demonstrations that inspired change. The documentary represents a movement that the general public only knew a hint about. Despite its accolades, including the GLAAD and Peabody Awards, How to Survive a Plague didn't get much attention at the time. With stakes still high for LGBTQ+ rights and public health, France's historical documentary and accompanying book are as important as ever. Number 5, A Grin Without a Cat. For most of the world, the 1960s and 70s were a time of great political upheaval over socialist ideals. Chris Marker's cinematic essay on the rise and fall of this global movement went beyond interviews with France's leading leftist figures. A Grin Without a Cat is a 3 to 4 hour montage of activism and atrocities across 10 years, the world, and the political spectrum. Marker's search for a regime that lives up to its ideals came up empty. The Odyssey is still considered one of the most comprehensive and immersive in contemporary Marxist cinema. A Grin Without a Cat may be a daunting undertaking, but it exemplifies as much as it addresses the importance of preserving history in all of its truth. Number 4, Apollo 11.
And boring through the vastness, the blackness, and the cold of space, they'll carry the pledge made 8 years ago by President Kennedy to put a man on the moon and bring him back safely in this decade.
For 50 years, NASA's giant leap for mankind could only be witnessed from afar. Todd Douglas Miller's Apollo 11 took audiences through every small step of the moon landing in July of 1969. The documentary extensively utilizes remastered archival footage of NASA's operations. With no modern material or interviews, Miller's fly-on-the-wall approach immerses you into Saturn V's legendary flight.
You got a good view there, Neil? Yeah, I sure do. Well, it's beautiful out there, isn't it? The eye approach. Man, this is really something. You ought to look at this.
The experience was widely hailed by critics and enhanced for audiences by IMAX. Apollo 11 won more than 50 awards for editing, direction, and overall technical achievement.
They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface.
Sure, there are many documentaries and movies that put this monumental event into perspective, but Miller's vivid reproduction of it is nothing less than a new frontier in documentary filmmaking. Number 3, Hearts and Minds. Despite visible opposition to the Vietnam War, few contemporary American films criticized it after Emile d'Antonio's controversial In the Year of the Pig. Peter Davis's approach with Hearts and Minds was to represent both sides of the debate against graphic footage of the conflict. This made the futility and atrocity of America's efforts to contain the spread of communism undeniable. Shortly after the blacklisted documentary's limited release, the Vietnam War ended with the fall of Saigon. Hearts and Minds went on to win the Oscar for Best Documentary and inspire iconoclastic filmmakers for generations to come. It is now preserved by the National Film Registry as a timely representation of history and a timeless testament to the horrors of war. Number 2, The Act of Killing. International filmmaker Joshua Oppenheimer interviewed Indonesian gangster Anwar Congo about the highest crime of his career.
Kita coba buat melalui layar lebar, buat apakah sepertinya layar kecil lah, apa sebagainya lah begitu. Tapi kita harus tunjukkan
bahwasanya inilah sejarah.
In the mid-1960s, he led a death squad for President Suharto's anti-communist purge. The act of killing follows Anwar and his associates slowly coming to terms with their genocide as they reenact sadistic tortures and murders. Audiences were overwhelmed by this study on how perpetrators of atrocities rationalize their deeds and are recognized in society. The study continued with The Look of Silence, in which Oppenheimer documented a purge survivor's journey to confront the men who killed his brother. Many now rank both documentaries among the best of the 2010s, but the act of killing was an intimate confrontation with history unlike anything that had been seen.
Nah, jadinya itu yang perlu ku informasikan bahwa macam mana menelannya, mencernanya, silakan.
Before we unveil our top pick, here are a few honorable mentions. Bisbee 17, a centennial reenactment of labor protests and mass deportation of immigrant laborers in Arizona.
I feel like it's this energy in Bisbee. There's this really dark energy, and it's like it can bring the best out of you, but it's also can make you into somebody you've never wanted to be.
Harlan Country, USA. Barbara Koppel immortalizes Kentucky coal miners' dangerous crusade to unionize in 1973.
Come on, you coal miners, wherever you may be.
One Child Nation. Nanfu Wang returns to her homeland to study 36 years of sacrifice under China's one-child policy. One Day in September, Kevin McDonald explores the political massacre at the 1972 Munich Olympics.
All the lights on in this Olympic site. An Olympic site which for more than a week now has been a place of serenity and comradeship, an Olympic village which in spite of some political crisis has been happy, and now today has been absolutely shattered by this tragedy.
The Times of Harvey Milk, a landmark account of the life, culture, and impact of California's first openly gay elected official.
And it was clear what Harvey Milk represented on that board. He represented change. He was different. He was different from the conservative majority on the Board of Supervisors.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications. Number 1. Shoah. Countless works have tried to make sense of the Holocaust. Documentaries like Night and Fog display the atrocities, while Arnold Schwartzman's Genocide addresses how history could repeat itself. But Claude Lanzmann said it all with Shoah, named after the Hebrew word for catastrophe and the Holocaust itself. Lanzmann spent 11 years traveling the world to interview survivors, perpetrators, and other witnesses.
Je suis tellement là que ma plume ne peut plus écrire. Créateur de l'univers, viens nous en aide.
Over 9 hours, these people discuss their unimaginable experiences and how the so-called final solution came about. Lanzmann gave a voice to the only generation that can begin to understand a tragedy that the world now worryingly takes for granted. Shoah has become recognized not only as the definitive Holocaust picture, but as one of the most important films in the medium's history.
All people whom I am going to see that the Jewish situation is unprecedented in history. Egyptian pharaohs did not do it. Babylonians did not do it.